Hey guys, welcome to Joe Knows. Well, if you didn't know it, I just got back from a trip, kind of a whirlwind, life-changing trip for me and hopefully for people in Ghana. But I was in Africa for about 10 or 11 days. It depends how you look at the time on the plane. So I spent 2 full days on the plane, about 9 days there, and I had a great time. So I'm here, I'm back, and we're beginning a new series in Joe Knows, and I'm calling it Against the Grain. And what we're going to be talking about is paradoxes in the Bible. So what is a paradox actually? A paradox is something that seems to be contradictory, and we find these all throughout the scriptures. And I'll be talking about a lot of them. I don't want to give you too many examples right now. We're going to look at one today, and we'll look at some others as we continue on this series. But what actually is a paradox? A paradox is something that seems to be contradictory, but it's not. Okay, and that's why I'm calling this Against the Grain, because, there's a passage in the scriptures. It's in the book of Isaiah, and it's where God tells Isaiah to tell us this. He says, Isaiah, my ways are not your ways, and your ways are not my ways. So what that kind of lays out is the fact that when a person wants to follow God, we need to recognize that our human natural instincts, our natural inclinations, our natural ways will not usually line up with being the ways of God. Now I think when a person, as a New Testament Christian, is walking filled with the Spirit, they will have a more natural inclination to do the things that are of God, but in and of ourselves, certainly when we're being controlled by our human flesh, our human nature, we're going to naturally go do wrong. And God's ways, they don't come naturally. So you have to be intentional as you walk with God. So I want to talk to you about one of these areas, and today will be a short Joe Knows to kind of get us kicked into this new series. It also has a little bit to do with me just getting back and having lots of things on my plate. So, but there's a verse in the book of Acts. Now, Acts is the fifth book in the New Testament, and the book of Acts takes place after Christ lived, died, was crucified, buried, rose again, and the church had begun. So Jesus wasn't on the scene, and yet the Apostle Paul quotes, and Luke writes this down, he quotes Jesus as having said something that I think fits into this category of being a paradox. So what Jesus was quoted as having said was, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So this idea of blessed, blessed is really the simplest way to translate the word blessed, to understand its meaning, is happy. So Jesus had made a statement at some point in time that you will be happier when you give than you will when you receive. Now this is a paradox. Certainly in our humanness, we would say, no, I really like receiving gifts. So I can remember looking forward to, my birthday is April 27th. Now, a funny story. I always thought that, for many years, till I was 16 years old, I thought my birthday was April 26th. Because in those days, when women had babies, the husbands maybe dropped them off at the hospital and went home. And my dad dropped my mom off at the hospital to give birth to me, and he went home, and he dropped her off on the 26th, but she gave birth to me about 2 a.m., but he didn't know that. So my dad, the birth certificate always said I was born 2 a.m., which is on the 27th, but my dad always had in his mind, hey, I dropped her off on the 26th, she had the baby, so his birthday is April 26th. Well, I went for a baseball tryout, and I had to bring my birth certificate, and I realized that for the first 16 years, I think it was 15 years of my life, I had the wrong birthday. Okay? So, but I do remember, whenever my birthday was, always looking forward to the aspect of receiving gifts. And but even more than the birthday is the Christmas. Because when it comes to Christmas, especially when you're a kid, but even as an adult, you have the build-up to Christmas. And it is a time that you receive lots and lots of gifts. And I can remember as a young boy getting very excited about receiving my gifts. But I also remember, I vaguely remember when I was young, being disappointed on Christmas Day, particularly Christmas night, because my anticipation of it being more blessed to receive, thinking about getting the gifts, left me empty. Just left me empty. And it continued. And Christmas for me, as I became a young man, a young adult, it became a time that I didn't really like because I knew it always led to a letdown. No matter how many gifts I had, being focused on receiving the gift always led me to have a letdown because it didn't make me very happy. I'm sure I got great gifts. I can't remember the gifts I got, but they really weren't able to make me happy. And then I became a believer. I was 22 years old and I found the Lord as my Savior. And I remember my first Christmas, I decided that I was going to focus on not receiving, but I was going to focus on giving. I remember buying a whole bunch of gifts and going to a hospital and going into the children's ward. This was on Christmas Eve, and dropping off the gifts for the children who were in the hospital. And I remember feeling really, really good. And then I wasn't really thinking about having expectations about receiving our gifts. Now, my family, we opened up our gifts on Christmas Eve, on the night. And again, that was the beginning of the expectations would be there, and then there would be the letdown. But this particular year, the first year that I celebrated Christmas as a believer, I was more excited about having dropped off the gifts to those children in the hospital. And when it came to the family time, I got some gifts. I can't really remember it because it wasn't my focus. And it was the first Christmas that I received that I had real joy because I wasn't focused on receiving gifts. My focus was on giving gifts. So I think that the idea that, of course, what Jesus says is true. And Jesus says you will be happier when you're focused on not receiving the gifts, but when you're focused on giving things away. That's a paradox. Okay? It's more blessed to give than it is to receive. It's a paradox, but since God's ways are not our ways, then I think we would learn that if we really want to be happy in life, we'll be givers and not necessarily receivers. Now, sometimes you receive a gift and you need to receive it and you need to accept it and take it graciously. But don't ever put your hope in the things that you're going to be given. Put your hope in the fact that you have the opportunity to give. So I hope this is helpful. Next week, we'll start talking about some of these. There are some that talk about going up by going down, and being weak when you're strong and being strong when you're weak. And they don't make a lot of sense, but we know that God's ways are true.